I'm Jim Akagi. I'm the chief of the Oak Ridge Police Department. A little bit about me. I started my law enforcement career in 1983 as a patrol officer in Lawrence, Kansas. After 3 years there, I went to the Drug Enforcement Administration, was a federal narcotics agent for 25 years. I retired from there in 2011, having served in a number of posts both domestically and internationally, and assumed my duties as chief of the Oak Ridge Police Department on July 1st, 2011, where I've been until today. So what I'm going to talk about today is a little bit about the technology angle, how the impacts that technology's had on law enforcement, a little bit with Oak Ridge. I think Deputy Chief Massengill will get into that in much greater detail, but more importantly how technology has impacted how we do things at the federal level, and certainly how it's changed over my 25-year career with DEA. Some of the new technologies that have helped the Drug Enforcement Administration over 25 years comes into two specific areas. The first is intelligence, and the second is enforcement. On the intelligence angle, a lot of the technology has to do with how we share information. And after September 11th, in 2001, the information sharing had to be much quicker. It had to be virtually immediate in some circumstances, but there was also a push to share more information to more people. So it wasn't only quicker, but it was a much wider dispersion. And to do that, there's been a number of agencies going to compatible information sharing technologies, both classified and unclassified. And prior to that, we really didn't share information as well. And a lot of our information systems were stovepiped, meaning they all went this way. Nothing ever went laterally. And what the federal government did was say to make information sharing effective, it has to not only go up, but it has to go out at the same time. And like I said, that changed a lot of ways, how we looked at information sharing. It was a paradigm shift for the agencies involved, and how quickly we shared that information and our willingness to share it. And once you establish that you're going to share information, you have to be able to do it with the wide bandwidth. You have to be able to do it sometimes encrypted, because out there on the internet, you don't want everything to be exposed, and it was a major undertaking for the federal government. On the enforcement angle, a lot of what you saw develop over the years was not only different techniques and styles of investigations in narcotics investigations, where the bulk of my career was. You saw a lot of different technologies impact how we did our work. One of the major things that we did was start recording people. We had to record our transactions, our drug deals, when we were working undercover, when we were working with informants. And the technology changed vastly. I'll give you an example, a real basic example. When I started my career in 1986 with the Drug Enforcement Administration, we had two different types of recorders, body wires or body mics. One was called a KEL, and that was a transmitting mic, and it transmitted just over a radio channel. And the KEL unit was about that big, just about the size of about 3 or 4 matchboxes. We had a hard wire, what we called a NAGRA recorder. That was about the size of a quarter of a shoebox. Now, think about having to conceal those on your body when you're going in to meet with drug traffickers, and hoping that they don't see them. It was quite difficult to do that. Now, for example, we have devices that are probably that size, concealed as ordinary items, pins, key fobs. The technology advances are just incredible. It is much harder to detect that. The other thing that the way that we were transmitting our audio signal was very easily, I guess, intercepted, and it was detected, and that could put your undercover officer at risk. Now they have very high frequency very narrow frequency bands, and pulse transmitters that are very hard to detect, making it much safer. The other thing we had is we only had audio technology back then. You couldn't conceal a camera on a person. We didn't have it. Well, now we've got cameras as small as buttonholes, and it's much easier to for us to actually record and have the visual angle too. Other ways that technology has changed are how we look at drug trafficking organizations. Again, when I started, a lot of the phones were switching over, believe it or not, from rotary dial to the push button phones, which started out as being analog push button. Well, then we went to digital technology, how the voice transmission carried over the wires, and the Drug Enforcement Administration, as well as a lot of federal agencies, did a lot of wiretapping or Title III intercepts of telephone lines. Well, our technology had to stay up with the telephone technology. Our ability to intercept traffickers' signals actually changed because the telephone technology changed. So we had to change with it. Then when you added cellular phones onto it and the different types of transmission of cellular phones, it became very difficult because at that time we were actually having to be within a certain distance of the cell phone to actually intercept it. So all this technology played a large part in how the federal government went from what you would think is the dark ages to how we intercept phones now. And now we intercept computers, we intercept high frequency transmissions or burst transmissions. It all has to do with technology, and I can tell you the DEA has a whole science and technology unit that does nothing but research and development of systems, and we're not the only federal agency that does that. So a lot of the new technologies that are out there that drive how we do our job come from the private sector, because we have to stay up with how people are communicating. We have to stay up with how people actually use technology to commit crimes. And by our understanding of that technology and our ability to intercept it or defeat it or utilize it, it certainly has to be up there with the same technology that the traffickers are using. How are we doing things differently because of technology? Well, I can tell you, Chief Massey will tell you how Oak Ridge does it. DEA does a lot of things differently. Used to, we had to physically observe things. Well, we don't anymore. We have a lot of trackers. There's unmanned drones. There are actually satellites that are used overseas. So a lot of how we look at the activities, illegal activities, the distance that we have to be, there are actually people that can sit in their office and track a vehicle across states from a computer. That's way different than having to follow that vehicle for 4 days from Los Angeles to Washington, D.C. So there's a lot of changes, and we're doing a lot of things differently. Some good, some bad. Our new generation of law enforcement, we didn't have computers when I grew up. There wasn't an internet when I grew up. When I was your age, there wasn't an internet. So it's difficult for people like me to have an understanding of that. You guys grew up with the internet. Obviously, you're much more savvy, and when we see our generation of law enforcement officers come on board, they can run rings around us. I may be the chief, but I have to listen to the experts. And you guys and your generation are the experts because you keep up with that.